So this was the ultimate solution to the slipping thread problem. So I built this sort of like a tiny vise from two 1 inch by 1/2 inch cold rolled steel bars, and then got 1/2 inch just simple whatever grade 2 hardware. That's all you need. And then in here is a hole saw that cut some plywood, and then I just nipped the center with a saw so that they can pinch together, and then you just squeeze both of these bolts down, and this turns into a vise that's so tight that you can actually turn these threads. And then as a handle, you just pull up on this vise. So pretty much with vices, the vise is just a handle. It looks like it's squeezing on the metal, but really it's just squeezing on the metal, so you can use it as a handle, because otherwise you can't just turn this. So yeah, it's all back together. A quick note on what you're looking at here. The top is the raceway. The piece underneath that is the aluminum block that holds the raceway. Below that is the round plate. It looks like a giant washer, and that actually fits loosely in the aluminum block, and that is what's pushing on the bearing once inserted, so that there's pressure on it. And then below that is the threaded pipe that's hollow, and then that's what you're turning to push against that washer, to push against the bearing to tighten it up. And below that is just the O-ring for oil. And I think everything should be working pretty good. I got the shaft nice and like polished up, cleaned up. It slid right in there with just my hand, which was really nice compared to how hard it was to get out. Yeah, so this is how this works, if anyone wants to know. So see this silver ring my finger's running on? That is the bearing, the raceway. So the raceway has to push inwards to tension between the two, as I described earlier. And the only way to do that is by using this threaded insert, this pipe. And it pushes inwards when you thread it in. And it doesn't actually run up against this raceway. Inside there is a steel plate, and I can show a picture of that in this video. And that steel plate is kind of like sloppy fit in there, and that actually pushes inwards and pushes on the raceway. I had reassembled this the first time and it would not work. Even with this setup, even with a regular full-size vise, it felt like I was crushing threads and it still wouldn't move. The inner diameter of this aluminum housing was so tight, it was like, it was under like by 1/10 of an inch. It was crazy. Whereas this is 2.5 inches, like exactly the raceway. This was like 2.41 or 3.9 or something. It was crazy. So I had to go in there with a Dremel and very carefully open up this pocket just a tiny bit, just to make it so that this bearing could slide in and out via the force hair. It does now, which is great. You don't want to make this pocket too big or this raceway won't be held tightly. You want it to be held tightly, but just loose enough that this mechanism will work. And the only way to know that if it's not working, you can't slide it in. But once this torque king moved in, it's working. So that's a lot of words. So this is pretty much like the amount of force you need is, it's pretty tight, but you can see the threads in there moving, and that ever so slightly coming out. And pretty much when it's all good, you don't want any slop. Right now, there's still a lot of slop. So I gotta get all that slop out, and then we'll be adjusted. All right, and there you go. So no more slop. You can see when I turn this back and forth, this bearing is not coming out at all of its raceway, and same down here. The back and forth I'm getting is actually, you can see the big bronze gear moving. That's just a slight slop that's in the actual axles, and that's fine. There's not much, that's just in the square joints of those. Down here though, I can feel where when it comes to the end, there is like this very, you're not seeing this in camera, but you can feel it in your finger, this very slight amount of play when it slaps home. And that's pretty much what you want. You don't want to be so tight that there's no give whatsoever. You actually can't see any give right now, but I'm not too worried about that, because this is really easy to turn, so it's not under a lot of force. So yeah, that's it. You just tighten this up until this comes out far enough that you're not getting any slop in here. And I can't stress enough how important this is for everyone that has a coot. These are the heart of the coot. They're kind of like the most special part of the entire machine because they're not on any other machine. So you want to keep these happy, and as long as you have these properly adjusted, they'll pretty much last forever. I mean, this one has been lasting years, and I can't even imagine, probably decades, and it has been so out of whack, so sloppy. But yeah, now it's good. Brand new bearings and races in there, which are great because the old ones were really nasty and rusty. If you are buying these bearings, it's important to note that they do not work with the races that come with them. These races are too small. These 15-45s, they're too tiny. You don't want those. You want to buy the bearings and make sure that they come with, or buy separately, 15, that's not going to focus, but it's 15-250s, 15250. There you go. So this is the correct races for those bearings to fit in the coot. And then the bearings themselves, if you don't want to disassemble yours, they are 15101s, and those are the actual bearings that go in there. So those are the races and bearings you need to replace. And don't forget to fill your boxes back up with oil. That's very important. You're going to want to fill up to halfway up that axle right there, and I'll show a picture after I'm done doing it. And you're going to want to use this oil. There's other options, like one other option. This is the non-synthetic version of the oil you can use in the coot. There is a synthetic version. It's like 3 times more expensive, and I replace it all the time because of water getting in past the sails. So I go with this, and then I just change it out every time I drive underwater because it's not too expensive. And that's what you're looking for. It's important to use this oil. You will destroy these without using the right oil. Not 90 weight gear oil or something. This oil. 2 reasons. One, in worm drives, there's a lot of friction, a lot more than any other kind of gearbox, because it's a sliding motion instead of like a lever tooth pulling motion. And this special worm gear oil, and it says worm gear right on the back when it's talking about what you can use it for, will survive that kind of friction. And the second reason is this oil has the right chemistry not to eat the bronze gear. Those bronze gears will sulfate if they are used with regular or other kinds of oil, and they'll break down and become brittle and break. So it's not just about like wear, it's literally you'll destroy it. And there's fresh oil. So that's what it's supposed to look like. And when I pour it in, I make sure to pour it in around the edges up here so you get some into the bearings. When this is splashing around, the oil is going to get in there anyways. I overfilled slightly, but that's okay. You can overfill. It just means the next time you do an oil change, you're just wasting more oil. And you want to keep an eye out for white, milky, swirly, light brown colors in your oil, because that means you're getting water ingestion, and you'll get that through the tubes. The water will ingest here. There's no sail there, and then if your sails are old and broken down like mine are, water will start to seep into these boxes, and you just have to keep an eye on the oil and swap it out. I mean, if you're not driving in water deeper than the actual tubes, you won't have that problem. But if you're using a coot like it's supposed to be, you probably will be driving in water and mud and stuff that deep. As a final step, you want to make sure you got your lock ring on there. You can just hit that with a gigantic screwdriver if you have one, or like a proper spanner tool. Tighten that up, and that should in theory keep the threaded pipe from loosening again. And I run a bead, or I'm going to now see this bead of white out. That's all, it's just white out, so I can see if one is rotating independent of the other. Yeah, put your axle back on. I mean, drive shaft.